fantasy short stories. Of Risk and Relativity by Lesley Herron. Chapter 25, Too Much to Handle.
Will you stop fidgeting?
Artemis wrestled with Eric's foot, grumbling as he yanked it back towards him and hauled the half-elf further down the operation table.
You complain more than the dog.
Oh! A noise of hurt and resent fell from Eric's mouth as he attempted to pull his foot away again. The operation table, as the necromancer called it, was nothing more than his workspace. A whirlwind of destruction must have torn through the room earlier by the sheer amount of crap that was strewn about. His clothes were covered in soot from the forges, and he fished out a pair of tongs from beneath his backside. Brandishing it at the necromancer, Eric clarified that, "I'm not complaining, it's just, this could have waited till we got topside." He frowned. "And to a more sanitary setting." He tossed the tongs onto a different table, mumbling, "And by someone who's done this before." That last remark didn't go unnoticed by Artemis, but he scoffed with a half-smile.
No faith in me, huh? Even after we built a time machine together.
Eric snapped his fingers, shushing the necromancer with a furious sound as he scanned the room. "I would prefer we kept word of that from our cache, if possible."
Fair enough.
Rummaging through a tray of miscellaneous screws and bolts, Artemis found one that would fit his current need and dove back to work. After a week of toiling away on this, he continued to find things he had missed, and it was becoming bothersome.
Also, I won't be returning with you guys.
The necromancer had dropped that fact so casually, Eric almost missed it. He sputtered in question, but his tongue failed to formulate a response that intelligent life forms could understand. Artemis laughed.
I still have so much to learn, and the Mugranins have agreed to teach me.
He wanted to start with something small and simple, but as he tightened the screw into place, he realized that artificial toes were not simple. No, they were incredibly complex to fashion, and even more difficult to build if they needed to function as an extension of the body. They were tiny, making all the innards difficult to manufacture and cram into such a minuscule space. It was like having to craft 7 pixie-sized watches. Couldn't be an even number because the half-elf still had 3 toes remaining. That made creating these things, designed to adhere to his shade, all the more difficult. But he had to start somewhere, and this was as far from anything vital as it could get. And, Artemis chuckled at the thought, even a catastrophic failure was unlikely to kill him. Despite the persistent doubt in the back of his mind, he resisted reaching for his book, Mastery of the Inevitable, and focused on adding the final screw to the elf's upgrade. Eric glanced down at the very clunky and slap-hazard toes being grafted to his feet. "You know, I used to do this stuff, right? Reconstructive biology was my major back in college. Not one I chose myself," he grumbled, but waved his hand down at the Frankenstein combination of metal on his feet. "I could help you make them, look better?" Artemis waved him off.
Thanks, but I got this.
That wasn't the point, but okay, Eric thought. But he'd take the necromancer's generosity where he could. In fact, it would be nice to stop stumbling every few steps, and even if they didn't work, it added weight that would help his balance. He frowned at the way the metal plates were bolted to his feet, and he was silently thankful he had already lost most of his feeling down there. That would not have been fun to go through the hard way, the way Vel had. At the reminder of that torturous night, Eric shook the thoughts and images from his mind and scoured for anything else to focus on. His eyes landed on the book near the necromancer's tray of tools, and he pointed at it. "So, did you steal that book on the way out when we fled Hortense Helicdome?"
Not exactly.
Artemis looked up, guilt tugging at his features.
I took it from Obus's personal library while the two of you were fighting."
Eric refused to let those images of a death god attempting to toss him from the topmost tower of the glittering cathedral to surface. A stony smile formed on his lips, but it failed to reach his eyes, and sarcasm laced his pensive tone. "So, while I was struggling to not die, you were perusing his bookcases?" When the necromancer just shrugged in response, he slapped his hand on the table. "What the hell, man?"
"No, it's not like that."
Artemis grabbed one of the marked tabs and flipped open the book.
"Obus is blind."
He waved a hand down at the pages, scrawled with beautiful, loopy handwriting, each word written in gold ink.
"The other books in the library were in Braille, save for this one."
He flipped it closed, turning it to reveal the cover was written in the same ink and handwriting.
"It was so out of place, and exactly what I needed. It was almost like it had been put there just for me."
He picked it up and hugged it to his chest with a contented sigh. Curiosity replaced his outrage, and Eric held out a hand. "Can I see?"
"Certainly."
Without hesitation, Artemis passed it over and got back to work.
"I'd love a fresh perspective on some of the contents."
The cover was well made, but plain, with only the title embossed on the leather surface. Cracking it open, Eric moved to a random page and started reading.
"The shade, once removed, is an unstable force, always so fragile and so prone to degradation, like a thing that wishes to cease, as if it knows its place is not outside the body. It must be contained immediately, encased within a crystalline prism. Such a delicate thing, isn't it, crystal? Strong, yet brittle. How often do we trust brittle things to hold the impossible?"
Eric frowned as his eyes slid across the passage. The author was undoubtedly brilliant.
"Once the shade is stored within a suitable vessel, it is there that manipulation can occur. By exposing the extracted shade to minor electrical charges, one can increase or decrease its energy flow. If the body is of the earth, and the soul is of the mind, then the shade is of magic, a font of limited but endless potential."
Eric ran his fingers down along the script, feeling the indentations in the paper. He could agree with the writing, but it was off. And yet it was so familiar. So much so, it dug a deep pit in his stomach, causing him to flip the book back to the title page, where he read,
"Herein you will find my treatise of discovery regarding shade, soul, and body. May this knowledge guide you down your chosen path wherever it may lead. For as I have always said, knowledge is power."
Eric's eyes snapped up. "This is written by the scholar." He dropped the book on the table, as if it had become a venomous serpent. Artemis lurched, grabbing the tome before it could slide off and hit the ground. He glanced up, curiosity twisting his features.
"And?"
"And why would you keep that if you knew?" Stretching his back with a sigh, Artemis returned the book to the table and gave his handiwork one final look.
"It's a book. Why does it matter who wrote it?"
"I don't know. Probably because the guy is evil? His holy crusade has wiped out most of the Fae on Ebra."
"And that's awful."
Artemis tapped at the book.
"This is just knowledge. It didn't commit those atrocities. And regardless, wisdom remains valid, no matter the source."
He pushed against the elf's mechanical toes, testing the tightness of the bolts.
"Morality plays no part in it. You need to stop listening to Indiga."
"That doesn't mean what's in here isn't dangerous." Eric narrowed his eyes, shooting mastery of the inevitable a dark look.
"Are you, of all people, really going to argue that?"
Artemis reached into Eric's bag, slung over the corner of the table, and pulled out the elf's journal.
"The exact same arguments could be made about this."
He opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. The necromancer had a point. Even if he wasn't a cult-leading fanatic, Eric had still killed people. Loads of them. And his own writings were on a subject that even the gods feared.
And again, knowledge, technology, power, whatever you call it, is not good or evil. Take your current situation.
Artemis pointed a screwdriver at him.
The power over time itself. You could use it for evil, for personal gain. You could unravel the universe if you wanted. Become a god.
He smiled.
But you won't, because you're a good man.
Eric scoffed. Mind telling the gods that? That pit in his stomach was beginning to make him nauseous. After Obus, I doubt any of them will give me a fair trial.
Then stop thinking of it like a trial and think of it like a problem.
Artemis pushed Eric's journal into his hands.
Identify the parameters, not the intent. Now, hold on to something.
Identify the parameters? What kind of advice was that? Eric frowned. Wait, did you say hold on to some... As Artemis energized the system, every nerve from the tip of Eric's new toes up to his brain were flooded with the influx of new information. Like scraping his flesh away from the inside out, his body seethed with something beyond pain. His brain slowly began to parse the foreign signals, filtering it down until he was left panting on his back, his body humming with an unpleasant tingle, only an echo of the agony it had been a moment ago. He stared up at the twisting maze of copper tubing that ran along the workroom ceiling, calming his breathing and returning functioning thoughts to his brain. It had only lasted a moment, but Eric knew what that was. He had witnessed his brother endure it many, many times, and even his mother. Neural bombardment, the brain receiving an influx of data it had no way of resolving. He had always assumed Vel had exaggerated the pain. Surely it couldn't be that bad, but he had been gifted only 7 small digits, and the pain he had just endured was almost enough to make him black out. Eric gave a single, shuddering breath and wiped his cheeks as he sat up.
Well, give them a wiggle.
Eric groaned but complied and tried to move his toes. The metal clacked as they responded to his silent request, and, to his surprise, he could feel them. But as he focused harder, there was something else, like fabric pulled too tight. His toes tugged at his shade. It had been stretched and pulled inside the copper digits.
How does it feel?
He didn't want to stifle the triumph the necromancer was feeling, forcing Eric to plaster on his best smile. Great! Yeah, like real toes.
Excellent. I was hoping that was the case.
Artemis dived into a drawer on the workbench and pulled out his second invention.
Now we can move on to these.
His stomach, pit and all, dropped below his knees as Eric caught sight of 2 very clunky metal ham hands. Please, something, anything, give me an excuse to leave. Like a divine answer to his prayer, the entire mountain released a mighty rumble, tools clattering as they were vibrated off tables and trays. The forges hissed and spat as molten metals sloshed about. Then, thundering up from the depths of the lava itself, a voice resonated through the volcano.
I awaken. Bring forth the Chronomancer.
And as fast as it had arrived, the shaking and rumbling stopped. Eric belted out a nervous chuckle. I guess that's my cue. He would rather face down Obus 1,000 more times than let Artemis hack his hands off, blackened fingers or not. Before the other man could form an argument, Eric snatched up his boots and took off, running barefoot through the halls, his metal toes clacking against stone with each step.
As far as giant iron tortoise supercomputers went, not that Eric had met many, or any, he could easily say that Arkesh was nothing short of awe-inspiring. He blinked up at the massive machine. Even in its dormant state, it had a way of making him feel small. But standing before the ginormous metal reptile as it moved and breathed steam, he felt insignificant. The power of the mind inside those circuits of flowing magma and hissing steam was palpable. Surely he should bow, right? Prostrate himself before this living construct of knowledge? His knee was in the process of bending when something told him not to break eye contact. And he agreed with that silent voice, knowing he should endure its ceaseless gaze and hope against all hope that this time would not go the same as the last. He scratched at his mustache as silence grew in the room. The minutes ticked by, coated in molasses. As he squirmed more and more, the ever-present pressure of standing before a god forced Eric to break at last.
Hello?
Maybe it had crashed again. The computer tortoise, Portents, spoke with a voice that was low and monotone, nothing more than a gentle landslide.
I am Arkesh. Speak your business.
You summoned me?
Eric wasn't sure where to begin, hoping that simple statement would be the perfect icebreaker and segue into his current predicament. The tortoise's glowing eyes flickered several times before it spoke without opening its mouth.
Correct.
Arkesh swayed its head, turning to fully stare down at the creature in front of him.
Speak your business.
Blinking several times, Eric was thrown off guard. This was not what he had expected to happen, standing before a giant computer. A giant nightmarish, fiery demon tortoise, sure, but a computer nonetheless. He was expecting a rain of brimstone or plague of toads or something. But perhaps the logical machine was less likely to make decisions based on emotion.
I am here for my trial.
Query accepted.
Arkesh paused, returning its head to stare blankly at the far wall.
You should forfeit this trial. You will fail.
A puff of air escaped Eric's mouth as all his rationalizing and reason went right out the window.
What?
He moved until he felt he was within the creature's path of attention.
Is this because of Obus? He really didn't give me any choice. Are you not even going to give me a chance?
Your actions with the other gods is irrelevant. Based on past performances, I have calculated a 93.76% chance you will fail to maintain temporal integrity. Logic dictates with staggering odds against you. Forfeiting is the best alternative. This will provide you with more time to prepare for your final trial.
With shaky breath, Eric actually smiled. The creature was trying to be helpful, not hostile.
Thank you for your analysis, but I believe I can prove to you I am not a threat. Would you be willing to let me try?
The creature blinked its massive, glowing eyes, processing this request.
Query accepted. While unlikely, I would enjoy, if such an emotion were possible, to be proven wrong.
Having taken Artemis's advice, Eric changed his perspective and was now no longer worried about a prediction based on his past performances. His problem was that every time he went back, he blundered his way into making things worse, then had to fix it,
or an opportunity arose that was just too perfect to pass up. The parameters of success, as had been pointed out to him, were to simply go back and not alter the timeline in the process. The obvious solution was to remove his involvement entirely, to score the points without having done anything at all. And to his understanding, his intent played a role in his time-traveling destinations. So, if he could just intend on arriving several hours before anyone he knew would arrive, then find a place to hunker down and lay low for a bit, after enough time passed, he could return and succeed at having no effect whatsoever on events. Was it cheating? Absolutely. But he wasn't the one that made the stupid test. He just had to be the one to pass it and get the gods' approval. Then he could go on his merry way and fix the past after all this was done. It was in that final, invigorating thought that Eric realized, pulled back down to the moment, he and Arkesh had been staring at one another for several minutes. He sure could tune out just about anything and everything if he really wanted. He shook his head, casting off the thoughts that he was ill-equipped socially, and smiled up at the tortoise.
So, yes, let's do that then, please?
Accepted.
The mechanical reptile began to reach out for him with its long neck, causing Eric to jump back before he realized that, tortoises don't have hands. How else was it supposed to stitch his shade for the jump? Oh, crap! He'd been hoping to have an extra minute or two to prepare. Instead, he closed his eyes and forced his brain into focusing. Arrive early, arrive early, arrive early. As a molten, wrought iron beak pressed into his sternum, Eric began to feel that telltale pull on his shade, and he kept his eyes shut. Arrive early! Red light flickered across his eyelids, followed by a painful tingle erupting in his fingers and his toes? Eric shuddered at the sensation, and before he could rationalize just how that happened, there was a loud crack, and his feet hit the ground hard. His eyes snapped open as he stumbled, but with the new added weight of his toes, he was able to keep his balance. He let out a chuckle, reminding himself to thank the necromancer when he returned. Eric squinted his eyes against the filtered sunlight that cast dancing shadows around a large clearing. He was definitely back home, in the Cascade Mountain Range. Was this a campsite? He frowned as he spun in circles, noting several deliberately placed logs and stone pits. He moved to one, but his new toes caught on a large rock. As he caught his balance, he turned to see that, no, it was not a rock, but a tortoise the size of a small Rottweiler, its black and red shell gleaming in the sunlight.
Arkesh?
Hey, you're not supposed to be here. This is a reserved campsite.
Eric, in the process of plucking up the god, turned his head to see a man in his 40s, beer gut and lumberjack beard, was approaching him, wearing a baseball cap with "I Believe" stitched on the front.
Sorry, I was just taking my pet turtle for a walk.
Eric tossed out a cautious wave as he attempted to pick up Arkesh, but the beast didn't budge. Despite its new size, it still weighed roughly the same as a mountain.
Isn't that a tortoise?
The smile became more forced as Eric straightened his back and nodded.
Yeah, Turtle is his name. I was 10 and dumb.
He barked a fake laugh. The man raised a brow as he stroked his beard.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, this place is off limits until we finish setting up for the convention.
Convention?
Eric's words fell away as recognition struck him like a bolt of lightning. The cap, the clearing, the logs.
Is it already time for the Octobu Bigfoot Fest?
His grin transformed instantly, excitement burning hot through his veins. That was quickly replaced with dread when he realized this place would soon be swarming with people. But he could manage. Just find a quiet place and wait it out.
Yeah, and...
I guess I got here a bit early, huh?
Eric scratched at his hair and looked down at Arkesh, who had ambled off toward the fire pit and began snacking on charcoal. I'll just finish with Turtle here and...
A little early.
The convention leader belted out a laugh.
Son, you're here about 3 days too soon.
You've been listening to Of Risk and Relativity by Lesley Herron, Book 5 in the series here on Tall Tale TV. If you would like to listen to the entire book in one place, or any of her other novels, you can find them at talltaletv.com/series, or by following the links in the description. 3 days? You're sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, if you and your tortoise could get out the way, I have a lot to get done before then.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Come on, Turtle. Let's let the nice man set up.
Son, you know tortoises are like one of the world's slowest creatures, right?
Yep, that's it. Here we go. 1 foot in front of the other.
Just pick the damn thing up and get getting, would ya?
Of course, sorry. Let me just get in here and...
You okay there?
Okay, one more time.
Skip leg day, did ya?
Come on, buddy. We can do this.
Yeah, lift with your back. Your back.
Holy moly. Whew. A little lightheaded. Just give me a second.
Step aside, son. I got this.
Wait, no. You okay over there?
Son, shut up and help me stand, would ya?
You know we're like the same age, right?